Tonight on Bridge City News, another produce scare as the Canadian Food Inspection Agency has a warning about sweet kale. There's also been a recall on dog food, food which may cause kidney failure in your pet. And Lethbridge Police discuss a new driving while impaired law, which they hope will keep our streets safer. Good evening. Thanks so much for joining us. A possible listeria contamination forced the Canadian Food Inspection Agency to issue a recall for Eat Smart's packaged salad. The agency says the 156-gram packages of salad shake-ups with sweet kale should be thrown out or returned to the store where it was purchased. The product had a best before date of December 3rd. The produce industry has been reeling since the E. coli outbreaks involving romaine lettuce and English cucumbers. A spokesperson at a local greenhouse says not eating greens out of fear is not the solution.
Unfortunately, the CDC made a blanket statement when they asked consumers to not eat and to stay away from all romaine lettuce from any region and from any source. Unfortunately, we felt very strongly that that should not have included us at Whole Leaf because we are taking measures to make sure that the consumer safety is top priority. We're not immune to risk. We are significantly decreasing that risk to almost nothing. So we just want to make sure that people know that this is Canadian grown. It's available 365 days a year, as this is the future of lettuce. And after these scares that have come into the marketplace, I think more consumers will be looking towards greenhouse grown leafy greens to fill the need in their salad bowls. So.
Inspired greens grown at the Whole Leaf Greenhouse in Coaldale are in stores across Western Canada, moving to stores in Ontario and Atlantic Canada.
You can't control the birds flying over, and you can't control, raccoons, and you can't control, cows getting into the field. And you know what? Cows are just like animals, and that's essentially kind of how E. coli happens. It's a contamination of the water source. Here at Whole Leaf, we're fortunate that we do treat our water before it goes over to the plants, but we also take a lot of other food safety measures. We're 95% automated. The first human touch is our harvesting crew, which they also do a quick quality check on the lettuce before it goes out. But essentially, there's no human hands, and we've kind of eliminated those risks, and so that consumers can feel confident that when they're eating Inspired Greens, that they're eating a clean, safe, trusted product.
Whole Leaf Greenhouse is under construction and projected to soon be the largest leafy green greenhouse in North America. At least 8 brands of dog foods are being recalled after the Food and Drug Administration in the United States said the food would contain high levels of vitamin D. Vitamin D could be lethal to dogs since it could cause kidney failure. The 8 brands are Nutrisca, Natural Life Pet Products, Sunshine Mills, A&F, Lidl, Kroger, ELM Pet Foods, and Ahold Delhaize. Yvette explains how to check if your dog has been affected.
First, you need to check your pet foods and see if it is one of the recalled foods. Then you need to monitor for the symptoms of the vitamin D toxicity. That includes vomiting, diarrhea, decreased energy level, decreased appetite, and possibly increased urination and drinking frequency. Vitamin D is a normal supplement added to pet foods. And unfortunately, there's no way of you knowing that there is an excessive amount, and your dog probably won't detect it either. Also, the symptoms can be very delayed. So your pet may have been eating this food for quite a while before they develop any symptoms. Your pet can be ill and already have high levels of vitamin D, and you have no idea that they are already ill. Excessive levels of vitamin D are an issue because of how they're metabolized in their liver. They can actually cause an increase in absorption of calcium and phosphorus in the body, and that's actually the dangerous part.
A Lethbridge scientist says antibiotic-resistant bacteria is on the rise. She says work like hers and other researchers is vital in helping to save lives.
The problem that we have now is that people are dying from bacteria that are resistant to these antibiotics. And so it's why the World Health Organization is pushing to say we need to do something now. If nothing is done, by 2050 we will have 10 million of people dying from this
Watch the full interview with Dr. Kernies Goldstein discussing the need for new kinds of antibiotics coming up after business news. Some major changes are coming to laws related to alcohol-impaired driving. Changes to Bill C-46 include mandatory roadside screening for alcohol, increased penalties for impaired driving, and removal of the bolus drinking defense. That's when a driver says a large amount of alcohol was consumed just before driving and was not fully absorbed when driving. Because of that, the driver's blood alcohol concentration was not yet over the legal limit at the time of getting behind the wheel. Lethbridge Police say the changes will help in their efforts to keep impaired drivers off the road.
Looking at other countries that have instituted similar legislation, their impaired driving related fatalities and incidents of impaired driving reduced dramatically. Australia is a good example where, depending geographically you're between a 20 and 40% reduction in impaired driving deaths. That's significant. Impaired driving is the leading criminal cause of death in Canada, and anything we can do to reduce that is a step in the right direction.
The new alcohol-impaired driving laws take effect on December 18th. So far, Lethbridge Police Service has arrested 4 people with impaired driving under this regulation. During this past weekend's 2018 Christmas Check Stop campaign, police also apprehended 2 suspended drivers, issued 26 Traffic Safety Act and Gaming Liquor and Cannabis Act tickets, and charged 2 people with resisting arrest. The campaign, which includes enhanced efforts to target impaired drivers, will continue into the new year. All drivers charged with impaired driving will have their license immediately suspended for 90 days, followed by a 1-year ignition lock. 3 Albertans have been inducted into the 4-H Hall of Fame. Mark and Pat Sayers from Lethbridge County and Nora Polovich from Manning are the 2018 inductees into the Alberta's 4-H Hall of Fame. The Sayers have been dedicated 4-H leaders and volunteers for 25 years. Polovich has been a 4-H leader and volunteer for 20 years in the Peace region. The honor recognizes exceptional 4-H leaders for their service, mentorship, and volunteerism in their communities. 4-H Alberta is recognized as the premier youth leadership organization in Alberta with more than 250,000 alumni. Canada's Outstanding Young Farmers Program named its latest award winners, and 2 are from Alberta. Craig and Janelle Ferrens operate Double F Farms near Kirriemuir, Alberta. They have a mixed farm including cow-calf grain feedlot. The couple say they focus on working smarter and are able to do more with less. The other award winners are Jordan and Alex McKay, who operate Willow Tree Farm in Port Perry, Ontario. Their mixed farm includes fruits, vegetables, beef, lamb, and maple syrup. A longtime Conservative board member is seeking the United Conservative Party nomination in Lethbridge East. Kimberly Lyle has officially put her name forward. Lyle cited her experience in community development and strategic planning as reasons why she's running. She says she is passionate about a broad range of issues, but wants the people to know that she's interested in hearing their points of view as well.
I'm a big believer in listening to people. I like to hear all sides of the story before making a decision. And I find in politics right now things get really polarized where you're right or you're left, and I just think good ideas need to come forward. So I want to be that person. I'm willing to go anywhere. I'm willing to talk to anybody. I'm willing to listen to anybody's story. And that openness, if I'm honored and lucky enough to win this nomination and become an MLA in the general election, my door will always be open. I'm not going to say no to anybody. The thing is, I don't have to agree with everything everybody says, and nor does anybody. We have to respect having the conversation.
Lyle joins Brian Litchfield as the candidates vying for the UCP Lethbridge East nomination. Party officials have yet to announce the date for a nomination hearing. The Alberta provincial election is coming up May 31st of next year. Dates are now set for 2 UCP nominations in southern Alberta. The Lethbridge West voting will take place noon till 8 p.m. on December 12th at the Public Library's Crossings branch. In the Livingstone-Macleod riding, various candidate forums were held, including one today in High River. Polls will open Friday in Fort Macleod and Claresholm. Voting will take place on Saturday. It will begin in Crow's Nest Pass, make its way to Pincher Creek and Nanton before wrapping up in High River at 6 o'clock. Rural communities and community groups received a nice funding boost yesterday to the tune of $290,000. The Community Foundation of Lethbridge in southern Alberta handed out some of the much-needed grants yesterday. The money will go towards supporting various programs and upgrading infrastructure. $25,000 went to the Pincher Creek Elks Club. That was 25% of what they need to raise to help build 2 homes in their region for needy families through Habitat for Humanity. Another $15,000 went to the Canadian Mental Health Association, Alberta South Region, to help with the Lethbridge Asset Mapping Project. In total, there were 28 grants distributed yesterday to help various community groups across southern Alberta. An Edmonton group home worker appeared in court today following his November 2nd arrest after he allegedly assaulted a youth in his care. 40-year-old Samar Tamraz is being charged with numerous offenses, including sexual assault, child exploitation, and child pornography. The victim was just 11 years of age at the time and was in the care of Tamraz at the group home. If you hear of any child exploitation offense, you're encouraged to call your local police or visit cybertip.ca. Sask Power is blaming a major buildup of frost on power lines for an outage yesterday that affected 200,000 people in the province. Regina, Moose Jaw, and many other communities went dark when 2 high-voltage transmission lines were tripped. The Crown Utility says the frost forced power lines to sag. Service has now been restored with the exception of a few farms. A new report says illegal border crossers is costing our country over $1 billion over 3 years. It has also created a new term, anchor relative, that one of our Ottawa contributors, Brian Lilly, is not happy with.
Anchor relative, we're talking about adults. And the way this works is if you cross the border illegally from the United States into Canada, you claim asylum, you're arrested, you claim asylum, you're put into the system. The next day, your extended family can start showing up at official border crossings and saying, oh, but my cousin's in there, my nephew is there, my niece is there. And I want to point out that it is extended family, because if you immigrate to Canada legally through the regular fashion, you can only sponsor your parents, your spouse, or your children. It's got to be direct family members.
Catch the full interview with Mr. Lilly discussing illegal border crossers and how another tweet recently landed our Prime Minister in hot water. That's coming up in the second half of our show. Former U.S. President George W. Bush and his family have been greeting mourners at the U.S. Capitol as his father, George H.W. Bush, lies in state. The Bush family hugged members of the public to pay tribute to the family patriarch who died Friday at the age of 94. The remains of the elder Bush are lying in state for a final night ahead of today's funeral service. Former U.S. President George W. Bush says he told his father just before he died that he loved him and he will see him in heaven. Delivering a eulogy at the elder Bush's funeral, George W. Bush said his father's last words to him were, "I love you too."
Thank you all for being here. I once heard it said of man that the idea is to die young as late as possible. One reason Dad knew how to die young is that he almost did it twice. When he was a teenager, a staph infection nearly took his life. A few years later, he was alone in the Pacific on a life raft, praying that his rescuers would find him before the enemy did. God answered those prayers. It turned out he had other plans for George H.W. Bush.
George H.W. Bush's granddaughter, Jenna Bush Hager, touched many people by reading from the Bible during the funeral service in Washington today.
A reading from Revelation to St. John. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. And I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "See, the home of God is among mortals. He will dwell with them. They will be his peoples, and God himself will be with them. He will wipe every tear from their eyes."
A 9-year-old boy has convinced leaders of a small town in Colorado to overturn a 100-year-old ban on snowball fights.
He just said, "Mom, I would like you to go change the law." And I said, "I'm not going to fight to change the law. If you feel this is something you want changed, then let's take the steps and see if it's something you could do."
What's the law?
It says that you can't throw snowballs. I think it's an outdated law. Thank you. What do you think? Thank you. Thank you.
There you go. Throw your first snowball, the first legal one.
Being proactive at such an early age, that's great to see. We had a little snow in our forecast recently. Some of it should begin to melt. Another warming trend is on the way. I'll have a complete look at the weather picture in just a moment. We had light flurries in many areas of the city today. Tonight, mainly cloudy with a low near -15. Tomorrow, the clouds should clear, bringing in lots of sunshine and a high near -7. Friday, mainly sunny again with the mercury climbing up to 0. A nice weekend shaping up. Saturday, lots of sunshine and a high near 2 degrees. Even warmer on Sunday, mainly sunny and high expected near 3. Monday, blue sky and a high near 8 degrees is on tap. Looking at the almanac, the average high for this time of year is +1 and an average low of -11. The highest temperature on this date was recorded in 1939 at 18 degrees, and the record low was a cold -34 in 1977. Sunrise was at 8:12, sunset at 4:32. Let's have a look at how tomorrow is shaping up across the country. Vancouver will be mainly sunny and 4. Victoria even warmer at 5 degrees under a mainly clear sky. Cooler in Calgary tomorrow with a high of only -4. Partly cloudy and -5 is expected in Edmonton. A high of only -10 is in the forecast for Regina on Thursday. Mainly sunny and -12 for Saskatoon. A chilly -17 is in the forecast for Winnipeg tomorrow under a partly cloudy sky. A good chance of flurries in Toronto tomorrow with a high of +2. Snow and -1 for Ottawa. Montreal will also get some of the white stuff and a high of 0. In the Maritimes, Fredericton, New Brunswick will be mainly sunny and -3. Halifax, Nova Scotia will have a mixture of sun and cloud and -1. Charlottetown, PEI will have increasing cloudiness and -4. And in St. John's, Newfoundland, they had a winter storm watch today. Tomorrow, more snow developing with a high near -2. The Bank of Canada has decided to keep interest rates unchanged, saying the economy may have more capacity than previously thought to grow without fueling inflation. The Ottawa-based central bank kept the overnight benchmark at 1.75%. In a statement, the bank said the persistence of the oil price shock, the evolution of business investment, and the assessment of the economy's capacity were all factors. The bank added that inflation has been evolving as expected, with core inflation tracking at around 2%. Calgary-based Canadian Natural Resources is setting its 2019 capital budget at about 20% or $1 billion less than its usual range. The company does say, however, it will ramp up spending if heavily discounted oil prices in Western Canada rebound. The company says it will monitor oil prices and the progress of the stalled Keystone XL and Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion projects, with the option to increase spending by about $700 million next year if needed. Shares of the company Roots are trading at all-time lows. Stock in the company are down about 20% after it lowered the long-term financial targets that were set when it went public last year. The company says for the last 3 months, sales were well below expectations of $87 million. That is down 3% from last year. Net income was just $2.8 million compared to $5 million last year. Roots says its performance reflected the absence of a large marketing campaign and unseasonably warm fall weather. Canada's oldest company is reporting another loss. Hudson's Bay lost $164 million in the quarter as sales only increased 5.6% to $2.2 billion. Now, there's some good news for the company as digital sales spiked by 8%, mostly because the company's Bay Day sales event moved from the fourth to the third quarter. The retailer says that Saks Fifth Avenue brand of luxury retail stores continues to show improvements. Sales in that segment were up 7.3%. Now, here's a look at today's markets. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, a possible listeria contamination forced the Canadian Food Inspection Agency to issue a recall for Eat Smart's packaged salad. The agency says the 156-gram packages of salad shake-ups with sweet kale should be thrown out or returned to the store where it was purchased. The product had a best before date of December 3rd. When you see news happening, drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. And if you missed any of today's top stories, check out our full newscast online at bridgecitynews.ca. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau got into a lot of trouble recently about a tweet where he offered $50 million. One of our regular contributors, Brian Lilly, has details next. But first, here's a look at what's happening in and around your community.
Here's your Bridge City News community calendar. Want some Christmas cheer? Find it at the 27th Annual Mayor's Christmas Concert at Southminster United Church on December 8th, beginning at 7 p.m. Presented by ATB Financial and the Lethbridge Community Band Society. Enjoy this holiday delight featuring local children's choirs, community bands, and more. Tickets are on sale now at CASA and will be available at the door. The cost is $15 for adults, and children 12 and under are free. Donations will gratefully be accepted for the Christmas Hope campaign. The Lethbridge Therapeutic Riding Association is hosting an open house called Ride Into Christmas on Sunday, December 9th from 4 to 7 p.m. Come and enjoy free horse rides, Christmas music, Doris Witcher's Winter Wonderland, a petting zoo, plus meet players from the Lethbridge Hurricanes hockey team. It's festive fun for the whole family. For details, visit ltra.ca. City Light Church wants to invite you to a City Light Christmas on Sunday, December 16th, beginning at 10:30 a.m. Enjoy singing Christmas carols, hear a powerful message from Pastor Doug Shimoda, and following the service, enjoy delicious snacks, Christmas crafts, a petting zoo, and door prizes. A great time for the whole family at a City Light Christmas, December 16th. And that's your Bridge City News community calendar.
So how did a convicted terrorist end up attending events in India alongside of our Prime Minister Justin Trudeau? According to a report issued by the National Security and Intelligence Committee, many people messed up. Joining me now from Ottawa is one of our regular contributors, Brian Lilly. Brian, it seems like maybe a few people kind of dropped the ball here.
Well, they did drop the ball, Hal, but, you know, the first thing that happened was Jaspal Atwal, who was convicted of attempted murder for the 1986 hit on visiting Indian politician, so that he could further, in Canada, he attacked a visiting Indian politician in Canada to further the vision of a Sikh homeland in India. He was invited because he asked. And then Randeep Sarai, who's the Liberal MP for Surrey Centre, forwarded his name onto the PMO. And then the PMO said, all right, add all of these people to the invite list. They didn't check any of them. But along the way, yeah, some people dropped the ball. But I got to say, this report, with all the bits that have been censored out from what the committee of MPs and senators from all the officially recognized parties and caucuses, what was censored out, they took out anything that dealt with the issue of, did the Indian government interfere in this? Did the Indian government have a part in trying to embarrass Prime Minister Trudeau? Because you'll remember that you and I talked about it at the time. That was the claim from the Prime Minister's office and from his then National Security Advisor, Daniel Jean. Oh, this terrorist ended up here because, oh, look, it's the Indian government. It's their fault. Well, now it turns out it's because he asked. The RCMP did flag him on February 13th, a full week before the event in Mumbai, India happened. They passed it on to the local CSIS contact in British Columbia, but that guy was on vacation, so nothing happened. They forwarded it on the next day to RCMP HQ in Ottawa, who looked at it and said, oh, okay. They didn't even pass it on to the PMO. They didn't pass it on to the Prime Minister's RCMP security detail. None of it. So there were a lot of balls dropped, but this goes back to the political side with Liberal MP Randeep Sarai and the Prime Minister's office. They've got to wear some of this blame as well.
Now, there was a lot of controversy recently surrounding a recent Justin Trudeau tweet. Trump's not the only one who likes to tweet, where Trudeau announced foreign funding to an American TV host and a certain cause. Tell me a bit more about that.
Yeah, well, the cause is called Education Cannot Wait, and it's about educating girls. And it was to celebrate Nelson Mandela's 100th birthday. The Prime Minister has received flack from even Liberals on this, because they're like, well, wait a minute. This isn't how you announce $50 million in funding. We all remember his response to the veteran in Edmonton about 9 months ago, just before he went on his India trip. You know, well, you're asking for more than we can give, is what he told the veteran at the time. And then there's no news release. There's no official government announcement, just a tweet to Trevor Noah, the host of the American Daily Show. Trevor Noah is a South African comedian. And let me just read you the tweet, Hal, because he said, "Hey, Trevor Noah, thanks for everything you're doing to celebrate Nelson Mandela's legacy at the Global Citizen Festival. Sorry I can't be with you, but how about Canada pledges $50 million to Education Cannot Wait to support education for women and girls around the world. Work for you? Let's do it." It was almost like, hey, bro, here's some tax dollars, dude. And it left a lot of people saying, you know, I don't care how good the cause is. I don't care how this makes Canada look. This is just the wrong way to do it. If he had tweeted out an official statement, if there had been something other than a, hey, bro, can I help you out with 50 million? I don't think people would have been this bothered. But this has rubbed an awful lot of people the wrong way.
Yeah, definitely. A new report on the cost of illegal border crossers not only costs over $1 billion over 3 years, but gave us the new term anchor relative. Can you explain that?
Yeah, okay. So this is in a report by the Parliamentary Budget Office, Hal, and it was a Conservative MP, Larry Malloy out of Manitoba, who he was having trouble getting full answers from the government on what the illegal border crossers were costing Canadian taxpayers. And so he said to the Parliamentary Budget Officer, can you look into this? Now, the Parliamentary Budget Officer was able to look into it to a degree, but not every department was forthcoming with what it cost. And so his best guess estimate is $1.1 billion over 3 years. So last year, this year, and next year, $1.1 billion. That doesn't count what the provinces being impacted by this. Those would primarily be Quebec the most, then Ontario, then Manitoba, and a bit BC. There's not really too many people crossing over in Alberta and Saskatchewan, and none in the Maritime provinces. So $1.1 billion for the feds, hundreds of millions of more for the provinces. But, you know, he was admitting, I can't really tell because the departments aren't giving me all the information, because the Parliamentary Budget Office is, you know, it's voluntary. It's not like the Auditor General where they walk in and they say, give us the paperwork. You've got to. So it was a bit of a surprise to me that there was this footnote. It was literally a footnote from information provided by the Canada Border Services Agency talking about anchor relatives. Now, I've heard the term anchor baby before, and I'm sure you have, where an anchor baby is someone goes to a country just to have a baby so that they can get automatic citizenship for the baby and then say, you can't send me away, I've got a baby here, and this kid is a Canadian or an American or insert country here. Anchor relative, we're talking about adults, and the way this works is if you cross the border illegally from the United States into Canada, you claim asylum, you're arrested, you claim asylum, you're put into the system. The next day, your extended family can start showing up at official border crossings and saying, oh, but my cousin's in there, my nephew is there, my niece is there. And I want to point out that it is extended family, because if you immigrate to Canada legally through the regular fashion, you can only sponsor your parents, your spouse, or your children. It's got to be direct family members, no cousins, no nieces, no uncles, no aunts, none of that. But if you cross illegally, literally the next day, you can be doing this. Now, the Parliamentary Budget Officer said, we asked Canada Border Services Agency for numbers on this. They said they're not tracking this. Well, immediately the Public Safety Minister's office is out saying it's not that big a deal because it was 500 and some odd last year, but now it's down to like 300 and some odd this year on average per month. So it was over 6,000 people doing this last year, and now it's only 3,800? Hold on a minute. This is still a problem. But the government doesn't want to see it as a problem. They want to keep pushing it ahead. They don't want to touch the border issue. I still think they want this to be a wedge issue in the next election. And if you're against people crossing into the country illegally or using loopholes like the anchor relative, you will simply be described as a racist and anti-immigrant, which is really unfortunate because I don't think most people against this would be.
Brian, the new trade agreement, which you like to refer to as USMCA, was signed in Argentina recently. Trudeau took on Trump over the tariffs, and Canadian officials are actually thinking about changing the name?
So they want to call it CUSMA. I don't know what's better, CUSMA, USMCA. Maybe we should just go with the new NAFTA, right? You know, we all know what NAFTA is. This is the new NAFTA. But yeah, they wanted to put Canada first. Donald Trump had given it this name. He didn't talk to the other leaders. He just went on the biggest pulpit in the world and said it's going to be called the USMCA, which of course makes you want to dance. And it kind of stuck. But the Canadian officials, ahead of the signing ceremony, were saying, no, we want to call it the Canada-US-Mexico agreement. If you recall, about a month before this agreement was signed, and it was signed in Argentina, by the way, at the G20, Canadian officials had been saying there would be no signing ceremony unless the tariffs on aluminum and steel were pulled. 10% aluminum tariffs, 25% steel tariffs. These have been on since the end of May. They are punishing. It's part of the reason, I would say, why General Motors has pulled out of Oshawa, Ontario. And so there's a lot of hurt on both sides of the border. But the U.S. didn't lift them. We still signed. I will give the Prime Minister kudos for this. While standing next to the most powerful politician on the planet, he took him to task and said, Donald, and he called him by his first name. He said, Donald, these are hurting both of our countries and they need to be removed. Good on the Prime Minister for doing that. Now, let's see if he can actually get them removed. We could have avoided them if he had just, been willing to anchor China a little bit, but he didn't want to do that last year.
Brian, construction workers are not happy with our Prime Minister over odd comments he made about how construction workers in rural areas can be damaging to communities and have a major social impact.
Yeah, and a lot of people are reading this the same way that I am. As I've mentioned to you many times before, the Prime Minister and I are the same age. We came together in the same era, went to school at the same time. And he made these comments about, when you send all these men into rural communities, there's social impacts. It reminded me of first year college, first year university in the early 90s when Trudeau and I would have both been told the same thing. All men are potential rapists. Not alone in reading it that way, because he won't say what the social impacts are, just that there are negative social impacts on male construction workers going into rural areas to work on these big projects like pipelines. And a lot of people, okay, well, what do you mean by that? And the inference is women will be harmed by men showing up. The Conservatives have been asking about this. Trudeau is obfuscating in the House of Commons. But an awful lot of construction workers, their wives, their families, female construction workers, taking to social media to say, these comments are not okay. A lot of people donning their the reflective vests that you might wear on a construction site if it's on the roadway, to say, hey, we're okay, but we're not okay with your comments.
I was chatting with some people in the automotive industry recently, and they were saying the reason why Ford and Fiat Chrysler are doing so well right now is because they're putting a lot of their money and their efforts into SUVs and trucks. But GM has said, no, the future is in electric cars. But Brian, those electric cars may not be made in Oshawa, Ontario.
Yeah, I don't. This has been the greenwash on GM closing down its one plant in Oshawa and its 4 plants in the United States. So 3 assembly plants and 2 powertrain plants have been shut down. They've been saying, people don't want what's there. Well, you're building the Chevy Cruze and the Impala and things like that, and people weren't buying that anymore. What are they buying? They're still buying vans. The Chrysler Grand Caravan still sells very well. No, they don't make the Caravan anymore. It's only the Grand Caravan because people want bigger. The SUVs are doing well. That is the market. Electric vehicles make up less than 2%. I believe it's 1.6% of total vehicle sales in North America, Hal. And they're trying to turn around and say, well, we're moving towards this and we're going to be building electric cars. And Oshawa's just not going to be part of that future. If GM keeps going down this road, GM won't be part of the future of the automotive industry. They've screwed up before many times, and it appears they're screwing up now. I do want to point out that Ford was the only car company, North American car company, that didn't take a bailout. And by the way, what's Honda building here in Canada? The Honda Odyssey. It's a minivan. What is Toyota building here in Canada? Well, they're building the Corolla still, which is a low entry model sedan, but they're also building the RAV4 in Canada. So it's a nice, fun little SUV. People love it. That's where the market is, and GM's going down the wrong road.
You know, it's funny. I know a guy that works at the Cambridge plant in Ontario there with Toyota, and he says, yeah, the RAV4 and Corolla still selling like hotcakes. A story we recently had on BCN is that groceries will cost the average Canadian family about an extra $400 a year. And Brian, that's without adding in the carbon tax.
Yeah, and so if you remember, I was trying to calculate numbers a little while ago about what this would cost the average family in terms of the carbon tax. And so researchers from the University of Guelph, Dalhousie University, and the lead guy on it is well known in Canadian media, Sylvain Charlebois, was talking about this and saying it'll be about $400 a year. And I looked through his numbers and I went, wait a minute, he's not accounting for the carbon tax. Now, in Alberta, you've already got one, but in Saskatchewan, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, New Brunswick, there's not going to be one, and the feds are going to put one on. And that will drive up food costs about 1.5 to 2% extra next year. So we're talking, for some families, it will be $400 to $600 or $700 because of the carbon tax. And I'll tell you this, Hal, there was an order paper question put in a little while ago by the Conservatives asking, because the federal Liberals say, well, every dollar picked up and will be returned to people in the jurisdictions. And they said, well, wait a minute, you're charging the HST on top of this. Will you return that? And the government's response was, well, people would have spent it on other stuff anyway, so it doesn't matter. We're talking about $1 billion a year in extra GST revenue that the feds are going to be getting off the carbon tax. And the response just released is, don't worry about it. They would have spent it on something else. So it's just $1 billion a year. What's the big deal?
Brian, we only have a few moments left here. Raj Grewal, the Liberal MP with a gambling problem, said he had more than $1 million in debt. Now, that's a serious gambling addiction. But now he said it's paid off. How did the guy pay off $1 million worth of debt?
I don't know how you get $1 million in gambling.
Put it all on red?
You've got to be in the hawk to the mob at this point, is the only thing that I can think of. Look, MPs are very well paid, about $172,000 a year. $5,000-$6,000 here and there extra if you're on committee. And by the way, he was on the finance committee quizzing officials about how to launder money through things like casinos. But I can't figure out how you get $1 million in debt on gambling at places like the casino in Lac Leamy, just in Hull, across from Ottawa, without owing money to somebody in organized crime. And then he says he's going to resign because he owes all this money and he's got a gambling problem. Then he takes a few days and he posts a video on Facebook and says, I'm not resigning and all my debts are paid off. Okay, how did you get the debts? Who loaned you the money in the first place? And then who helped you pay it off? Canadians deserve to know answers on this. And by the way, so does the RCMP and FinTrack. I don't expect Raj Grewal to be reelected anytime soon, but he's not giving up his seat just yet. And you know what that'll do? That'll keep Jagmeet Singh, who used to represent that same riding provincially, from running in the federal by-election. So maybe Raj Grewal is still helping out the Liberals, even though they kicked him out of caucus.
You know, it sounds like a script for a good Hollywood movie.
It does, doesn't it?
One of our Ottawa contributors, Brian Lilley, joining me via Skype. Thanks again, Brian.
Thank you, Hal.
Most of us have had the experience of becoming sick and then recovering with the help of an antibiotic. But increasingly, we're hearing more about antibiotic-resistant bacteria, which present the need for new kinds of antibiotics. A Lethbridge scientist is at the forefront of some of this research. Joining me now is Dr. Sophie Cornet-Goldstein, a researcher at Lethbridge Community College. Now, prior to moving to Lethbridge, she tenured as a research scientist at the Pasteur Institute in Paris, France, where she developed a unique experimental model of a cell in the intestinal tract. And her work is published and is used around the world. Welcome to Bridge City News, Dr. Sophie.
Thank you.
So first of all, explain what antibiotics are And how are they typically produced?
So the antibiotics are basically molecules that you will take, or drugs that you will take for treating bacterial infection. So the antibiotics will not work for viral infection. So if you have a virus, you must not take antibiotics. So this is one thing. The antibiotics are, for now, produced by bacteria and fungi. So the one that you have on the market are basically coming from these two microbes.
Can you explain why there's antibiotic-resistant bacteria? Why is it such a problem?
Oh, it's a big problem because I think one of the main things is that we are using antibiotics for many years. The first antibiotic was penicillin, and it was discovered by Alexander Fleming in 1928, and it arrived on the market in 1940. So for almost 80 years, the antibiotics have been used. And the more you use an antibiotic, the more bacteria, antibiotic-resistant bacteria will select. So now, 80 years later, we have lots of them. So when you take an antibiotics, you basically kill the one that cannot grow, and you will select the one that can grow. So it's why we have more of these ones. Something interesting was that Fleming, Alexander Fleming, he realized already that there would be a problem. So it's not something that is new, if you want. These bacteria were always present on the earth, but we are selecting them. The problem that we have now is that people are dying from bacteria that are resistant to these antibiotics. Mm-hmm. And so it's why the World Health Organization is pushing to say we need to do something now, because it takes about 10 years to develop an antibiotics. So if we wait too long, then we'll be having more and more of this problem. So they estimate that if nothing is done, by 2050, we will have 10 million of people dying from this problem.
Now you're leading a new project at Lethbridge Community College, and it's called the Antibiotics Alberta Plant Project, which is really focused on studying the plants native to Alberta. Tell me more about this project.
This project, so it started in 2013 about, and at this time I was working with my husband, in fact, at the University of Lethbridge, and together we started working with plants, finding, the plants have lots of molecules, and lots of drugs are coming from plants, like aspirin, for example. And so I worked with him on this, on this research. And then as a microbiologist, I was very tempted to do my small experiment on the side. And so, which I did, almost hiding, and it worked. And so then basically based on that, I said, well, we should explore more this possibility to find antibiotic from plants, because as the fungi and the bacteria, they need to fight against bacteria also. Mm-hmm. They don't do the antibiotics for us, they do them for themselves, like the bacteria and fungi. So,
what kind of plants are being studied then?
Ooh. So for now, it's difficult to say. I cannot give you names because there is an intellectual property that has to be done before. Okay. But my goal is really to test all the plants, if possible, from here, because each plant will have different properties. And so we have tested about 25 different plants. We have found at least 6 of them being active, and they come from different families. So the idea is that if they are coming from different families, they will have different molecules, so different antibiotics. So the more we, look for something, the more interesting result we will get.
I understand that some of these plants were also used by Aboriginal people and were quite effective as well. Is that part of your study, your research?
Yes. So this is not really in place now. I started with a student, Desiree Telfezer, who is a First Nation. So together we put this project in place at the college. The goal is in the future to have more connection with First Nation and to know, based on what we have found, if there is a correlation. But really, again, the bacteria are very diverse. And so we can find molecules that will be directed towards these different bacteria.
So how exactly does the process work, finding out whether or not a plant is effective during treatment?
So it's basically kind of a sample test, something that we do with students. It's a bit, adapted, but the first test is called the microdiffusion test. And it's basically, the idea is to put the bacteria in contact with the plants. And when you have an effect, when the plant is active, then it will kill the bacteria, or it will inhibit the growth. The other technique that we put in place at the college is the microdilution technique, which is a bit more advanced, if you want. And then we can get more criteria to determine if the plant that we have tested is interesting or not, to go further in the experiments.
Have you looked at other plants outside of Alberta, maybe not native to our region too?
Not really, no. Okay. We focused really around the college. Mm-hmm. So the idea came, and then at this time we were at the university and we were going outside of the university. We have permit for that. And, taking plants and trying. And then we are extending our collection. So the further was in the Crossness Pass, basically. And so we have permit. We don't destroy the land. We make sure that everything will grow again. We don't need a lot of plants.
Do you do some reseeding?
Not yet.
No, okay.
But this is another plan. Is to if we find a plant that will work, is to after that to grow this plant outside in a lab, for example, and then after try more testing.
So how long does the process generally take, Dr. Sophie? How many years until we see these plant-based antibiotics available at our local pharmacy?
Oh, so the testing, itself for us, going from the plant to finding something that is active is quite, fast or quick. It takes about, let's say, 1 month. Okay, and then you say, okay, I have a plant that is active. And then after, we have a collaboration with Dr. Raymond Anderson, which is a natural product chemist at UBC in Vancouver. And he's doing the isolation of the molecule, because really the goal is not really to find a plant that is active, is really to find the molecule, like penicillin. Mm-hmm. So this can take another month, but after going to the market, it can take 10 years, because we need to be safe. We need to make sure that it's not toxic.
Test and retest.
And yeah, so there are lots of steps before we can have something on the market. So it's why if we start today, we can hope to have something maybe in 10 years. But if we wait 10 years, then we'll have more antibiotic-resistant bacteria.
I know people that say a lot of antibiotics cause intestinal problems, but with a plant-based, it may not necessarily be that way?
It's possible that it will be the same. The goal here, it's because the antibiotics are basically fighting against a class of bacteria. We don't have, for now, a treatment that will be able to target the only one that is causing disease. In your intestinal tract, you have more microbes than you have human cells. So you are always fighting and killing a big portion. But it's always a balance. What do you want? To keep your infection, or to get the antibiotics and have diarrhea or secondary effect? But there are other options like bacteriophage, but I think it's not the purpose for today. But for the one that we think that we'll be finding, probably that would be maybe the same, but hopefully not.
I understand your study also involves plant-based antibiotics for veterinary purposes. How would that differ as opposed to humans, maybe using these antibiotics in animals, such as farm animals?
Yeah, so one thing that is important, and this is especially in Alberta, it's very important, the majority of the antibiotics are used for raising animals. 80% is used for food animals. So the goal is really to separate the antibiotics that we'll be using for humans from the one that we'll be using for animals. Things have changed in December, because now the farmer cannot use antibiotics for prevention or for promoting the growth of the animals. It's only for treating. So finding new antibiotics that we will not be using in humans, for example, will be very good, because then the ones that are working will be protected. So again, if you use a lot of antibiotic, you will have more antibiotic-resistant bacteria. So finding new antibiotic for animal purposes would be good.
Is it true that your husband, Dr. Roy Goldstein, is also researching plants, but in this case, to maybe find some that may be effective in fighting cancer?
Yeah, it is true. We started the project together. He's a cancer researcher at the University of Lethbridge, and he developed his laboratory there. And so we are sharing, basically, if you want, the plants. So we are collecting together. And we have two objectives. For myself is finding an antibiotics, and for Roy is finding something that will help for cancer treatment. Now, cancer research is something very complex, because for antibiotic it's fighting something that is not you, bacteria, but for cancer it's basically fighting your cells that are becoming crazy. So hopefully he has some good results, but I think it will be easier for him to talk about it.
I've had doctors tell me before that use aloe vera plants for burns, for treating burns, you know, almost like an antiseptic or antibiotic at the same time. Is that true with aloe vera plants?
Yeah, they have some
benefits, health benefits.
Some health, benefits, for sure. And plants in general, they have lots of good molecules in it.
And dandelions too. I've seen people have dandelion salad, dandelion soup.
Yeah.
Like dandelions, I'm always the weeds I want to get rid of.
Yeah.
But actually there are a lot of health benefits with dandelions.
Yeah, garlic.
Garlic?
They have a really good property against E. coli.
Oh. What are some of the other benefits for garlic? Preventing colds, is it?
Preventing cold maybe, but we did kind of a research with my daughter for the science fair, and she was really into that and testing garlic, and I was very amazed by the activity that the garlic has against especially E. coli that is difficult to treat. So even something that you have in your kitchen can have some really good properties, not only for antibiotics, but in a more general way.
And look at the recent issues we had as well, speaking of E. coli with romaine lettuce, English cucumbers. What are your thoughts in regards to some of those outbreaks?
Yeah, so again, one thing is, again, trying to be safe, trying to avoid having some infection. E. coli is a bacteria that you can find in warm animals. So finding an E. coli in a lettuce means that there was a contamination somewhere, I suppose. So the prevention is probably the best. And again, after finding new molecules, you can imagine even spraying your salad with these molecules. So the application for this research can be huge because the use of antibiotic is very large, it's very broad.
So when we're shopping for vegetables as well, is it really important to make sure we wash those vegetables because of a lot of the pesticides that you see on those veggies?
Pesticide and also microbes.
Okay.
Because even when you do the gardening in your own garden, if you have a cat, going and pooping on your salad or beside it, you can be infected. So the prevention, and I think being educated. So I'm teaching microbiology also at the college, and it's what I am always saying to my students is, if you know where you can find microbes, then you can be safer. So knowing that, for example, if you prepare some beef, make sure that it's really separated from your salad or your tomato that you will not cook, for example.
Cross-contamination, right?
Cross-contamination, exactly. So if you cook your meat, we're fine.
Dr. Sophie Curnet Goldstein, researcher at Lethbridge Community College, thanks so much for joining me in studio today.
Thank you very much.
On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and have a great night.